Please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it truly means so much to me. When Queen Camilla leaned in to speak to Princess Charlotte, she had no clue Catherine was watching from across the room. And what happened next shifted the whole vibe of that day. It was supposed to be a calm spring weekend on the royal calendar. Scheduled tight, polished to perfection, all unfolding at Windsor like clockwork. But something felt off to Princess Catherine from the start. She's learned to trust that quiet instinct in her gut, especially when it comes to her kids. And Charlotte? She wasn't her usual bright, chatty self that morning. She wasn't sulking, she wasn't upset, she was quiet. Too quiet, almost like she was trying to disappear into the wallpaper. That's not Charlotte at all. The family had gathered at Windsor Castle for a private luncheon celebrating one of Camilla's latest charity patronages. These events aren't rare, but they can get complicated fast. Different generations, different circles, Camilla's longtime allies, Catherine's side of the family, a mix of extended royals who don't always click the same way behind closed doors. Catherine shows up with grace, always, but she stays alert. While Prince William can ease into conversation and lean back into his role, she's clocking everything, every look, every whisper, every shift in energy. That afternoon, Charlotte was seated with the younger royal cousins in one of the side salons. Formal, but relaxed by palace standards. The kids were expected to sit straight, speak politely, sip tea, and play nice while the adults handled their business in the main hall. Catherine helped Charlotte into her seat, smoothed her dress, kissed her forehead, and gave her that reassuring smile. One last glance before stepping out. Nothing looked wrong. Not yet, but that feeling wouldn't leave her. About 45 minutes later, Catherine was mid-conversation with a senior courtier when something caught her eye. Charlotte walked past one of the open corridor doors. She wasn't crying. She wasn't making a scene. But her face had changed. Her lips were pressed tight, her shoulders stiff. She looked hurt, not physically but emotionally. And that hit different. Catherine immediately excused herself and followed. She found Charlotte standing alone near one of the service doors at the end of the hallway. Hands folded, eyes locked on the floor. Small, but holding herself together. "What happened?" Catherine asked softly. Charlotte hesitated. "Nothing, Mummy." But Catherine knows her child. She crouched down to meet her at eye level. "Now, sweetheart, I know when something's wrong." Charlotte swallowed before speaking quietly. "Granny Camilla said I was showing off. She told me not to speak unless I was spoken to." Catherine blinked, steady but stunned. "When did she say that?" "When I told Louis the answer to a question," Charlotte explained. "We were just playing a guessing game, but she got annoyed." Catherine didn't react right away, not on the outside. She pulled Charlotte into a hug and held her close. Calm face, strong posture, but inside, everything had shifted. Catherine has always tried to keep the peace with Camilla. It's never been simple. Their relationship has often felt like a polite dance. Careful steps, measured smiles. Camilla has firm ideas about hierarchy, behavior, and how things should be done. She usually wraps it all in charm, but sometimes the tone slips through. Still, Catherine believed those sharp edges would stay between adults. She never expected them to reach her children. That realization landed heavy. Later, during the family walk through the gardens, Catherine stayed close to Charlotte. Camilla walked ahead beside Charles, chatting easily as if the morning had been completely smooth, like nothing had happened at all. But Catherine saw it differently now. It wasn't just about one comment. It was about the fact that Charlotte felt she had to shrink herself, that she thought speaking up was wrong. That kind of message sticks. After the garden tour, everyone regrouped inside. The room filled with soft laughter, clinking china, and the quiet shuffle of staff moving through with trays. Catherine kept her composure, but her attention was sharp. And then came another moment. Charlotte reached for a second scone at the refreshment table. Completely normal. Camilla turned, looked down at her, and with a half smile said, "Perhaps that's enough." The words weren't loud, they weren't dramatic, but they carried weight, and Catherine saw it. The quick hesitation in Charlotte's hand, the slight pullback. That was when it stopped being small. Catherine didn't say anything in that second. Not publicly, not impulsively, but the line had been crossed and she knew it. When it comes to her children, she doesn't play about their confidence, their voice, or their space. And Camilla may not have realized it in that moment, but Catherine was watching, and she doesn't forget. "One is enough, darling. We don't want to appear greedy." There it was again. Catherine saw it crystal clear this time. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it wasn't random either. These weren't isolated moments. They were patterns. Little comments that might seem harmless alone, but when they keep landing on the same child again and again, that's not accidental. Catherine didn't react on the spot. She never moves messy. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't create scenes. Her silence has always been calculated. But now, she had seen enough to know that staying quiet forever wasn't the move. William hadn't picked up on any of it yet. He was tied up with Charles and a couple of senior aides, deep in schedules and upcoming appearances. But Catherine already knew, once they were back at Adelaide Cottage, she would speak. Not as a royal, as a mother who saw her child dim her light. Before that conversation could even happen, though, something else unfolded. Catherine never expected royal life to be simple. She understood the weight of duty, the invisible rules, the pressure to smile through everything. She accepted the balancing act. What she never signed up for? Watching her child feel small inside her own family. That line was firm. Just after tea had been cleared, the adults shifted into one of the sitting rooms off the main gallery. An old routine carried over from the late Queen's time. The children were allowed to join briefly before heading upstairs with their nannies. Charlotte walked in beside George and Louis, face calm but guarded. She took a seat near the fireplace and picked up a book from the shelf, quietly flipping through the pages, trying to stay out of the way. Then Camilla entered, glass of water in hand, laughing softly with one of her longtime aides. She seemed relaxed. She noticed the children, offered a small smile, then turned back toward the adults. Within minutes, the tone shifted. George and Louis wandered over to stand near their grandfather, close to Charles. Charlotte stayed seated, book in her lap. After a short pause, she looked up politely. "May I play the piano for a bit?" she asked. Camilla glanced over her shoulder. "The piano?" "Yes," Charlotte said. "Just quietly." Camilla took a slow sip from her glass and looked directly at her. "Darling, that's not necessary. Let the grown-ups enjoy some peace. Why don't you sit still like a proper young lady?" It wasn't shouted, it wasn't explosive, but it was pointed, sharp enough to sting. The kind of comment adults brush off but kids feel deeply. Charlotte's cheeks flushed. She closed her book without a word and folded her hands neatly in her lap. Catherine heard every syllable. She had been standing nearby, speaking with Lady Lansdowne. Her eyes snapped toward Charlotte, then shifted to Camilla. She didn't interrupt. She didn't step in publicly, but her stare lingered longer than usual. Camilla noticed. Their eyes met for one tight second. Then Camilla looked away. The room carried on like nothing happened. Conversations restarted, laughter resumed. But the energy had changed, even if no one said it out loud. Back at Adelaide Cottage that evening, everything felt quieter. Catherine tucked Charlotte into bed herself. No staff, no rushing, just mother and daughter. William was finishing a call in his study, and George was already asleep. Catherine sat on the edge of the bed. "Did you feel upset today?" she asked gently. Charlotte hesitated. "A little, but I'm okay."
Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. You notice there, she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
"You don't have to pretend," Catherine said softly. Charlotte looked up, honest, direct. "Granny Camilla doesn't like when I talk too much." That was it, clear as day. Catherine kissed her forehead, smoothed her hair back, and stepped into the hallway. When she passed William's study, he looked up immediately. "Is she all right?" he asked. "She's trying to be," Catherine replied. William leaned back slowly. "What happened?" Catherine told him everything. Calm, precise, no dramatics. She repeated Charlotte's words exactly. She described the repeated remarks, the subtle dismissals, the way Charlotte kept shrinking herself to avoid attention. William didn't interrupt. He listened. But by the time she finished, his jaw was tight. "This isn't something we let slide," Catherine said firmly. "I agree," William replied, "but we handle it carefully." That part mattered. The next morning, Catherine made a quiet decision. She requested that Charlotte stay home from her next scheduled appearance. A charity garden project Camilla had arranged, meant to include several royal grandchildren. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't public, but it was intentional. Catherine wasn't going to let her daughter feel silenced in spaces she was born into. Not now, not ever. Catherine told the household Charlotte had a minor cold. Simple excuse, easy to accept. But the real reason? She didn't want her daughter stepping back into that space until she knew it would feel safe again. Word reached Camilla quickly. News travels fast between royal households, faster than anyone admits. Camilla didn't make a speech about it. She just raised one eyebrow when an aide mentioned Charlotte wouldn't attend. Then, under her breath, she murmured something like, "Probably too delicate for a little mud." Catherine heard about that too. Of course she did. Nothing stays private for long behind palace walls. The situation might have cooled off right there, if not for what happened the following weekend. It was a small private dinner at Highgrove. Charles had invited William and Catherine for what was meant to be a relaxed evening. Just family, no press, no big ceremony. The idea was simple. Reconnect, talk through upcoming royal tours, smooth things over quietly. But calm doesn't always last. Catherine walked into the main lounge with Charlotte, who had come down just to say goodnight to her grandfather before heading upstairs. The fire was glowing. Glasses clinked softly. It looked peaceful on the surface. Camilla barely looked up from her chair by the fireplace. Charlotte stepped forward, posture straight, voice polite. "Good evening, Granny." Camilla didn't return the smile. "Are you sure you're not too tired to be here?" she asked. It was subtle, thin, but sharp enough that everyone in the room caught it. Catherine's eyes locked onto Camilla immediately. This time, she wasn't shelving it for later. The warm smile she walked in with, gone, replaced by something steady, focused. She turned to Charlotte calmly. "Why don't you say goodnight to Grandpa and then head upstairs with Anna?" Charlotte hesitated for half a second and looked up at her mother. Catherine gave her a small, reassuring nod. Charlotte walked to Charles, hugged him gently, then left the room with the nanny. The door clicked shut. Silence followed. Camilla leaned back, still holding her wine glass. She glanced around and said lightly, "Well, she's very sensitive, isn't she?" William went still. Charles shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, but Catherine stepped forward before anyone else could soften the moment. "No," she said evenly. "She's not too sensitive. She's a child, and she deserves to be spoken to with kindness." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "I didn't mean it that way. I was simply surprised she's still awake. It's hardly something to get upset about." Catherine didn't blink. "It's not just tonight," she replied. "It's been happening for weeks. I've heard what's been said to her, and so has she." And the air in the room felt heavier. Charles tried to ease in. "Darling, perhaps we should—" "No," Catherine said gently but firmly. "If it were one comment, we'd move on, but it's not one comment. It's a pattern, and I won't stand by while my daughter is made to feel less than." Camilla looked toward William, clearly expecting him to smooth it over. He didn't. His silence said everything. "I've worked hard to keep peace," Catherine continued. "That's always been expected of me. I've overlooked moments that didn't sit right, but this is different. This involves Charlotte, and I won't let anyone, no matter who they are, chip away at her confidence." Camilla set her glass down and leaned forward slightly. "You're reading too much into this. You always take things so seriously. Children are resilient." Catherine's expression didn't shift. "Children remember how they're spoken to," she said calmly, "especially by the people who are supposed to protect them." There was no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just control, measured strength, the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. William finally spoke up. "We're asking for basic respect," he said. "Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. She's just being herself. That shouldn't be an issue." Camilla glanced at Charles again, but this time he stayed quiet. He understood what was happening. Catherine wasn't attacking. She was drawing a boundary. And once she does that, it sticks. The tension hung in the room for several long seconds. No one rushed to fill it. Eventually, Catherine excused herself. William followed shortly after, leaving the room thick with unspoken understanding. Upstairs, Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bed again. No questions this time, no investigations. She simply took her daughter's hand. "You did nothing wrong," she told her softly. "You were polite, you were kind. That's all I'll ever ask from you." Charlotte looked up at her, eyes searching. "I tried to be," she said quietly. "You don't have to try to be perfect," Catherine replied, brushing her hair back gently. "You just have to be you." And in that moment, it was clear. Whatever tension existed downstairs, whatever politics played out in drawing rooms and behind closed doors, one thing wasn't negotiable. Charlotte would never be taught to shrink herself to keep anyone comfortable. Not in that family, not anywhere. Catherine looked at Charlotte and said softly, "You just have to be you." Downstairs, Charles tried to shift the mood by changing the subject. Classic move. Camilla stayed quiet. She didn't apologize, but she didn't defend herself either. The air was heavy, but controlled.
What it is.
What it is, exactly, and how we can support not only ourselves but each other as well.
Later that night at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William sat in their room and finally exhaled. Catherine was calm, but the day had drained her. You could see it in her eyes. "She doesn't need to like me," Catherine said evenly, "but she will treat Charlotte with respect. That's non-negotiable." "She will," William replied, "because we're not letting this continue." That was the line. The days that followed were polite, but different. The warmth had cooled. The next big event was Charlotte's school recital at Lambrook. Catherine made a quiet decision. Only immediate family would attend. Camilla was not invited. Officially, the palace called it a scheduling conflict. That's how these things are packaged. Clean, neutral, but inside royal circles, and definitely in the press, people read between the lines. Publicly, nothing looked off. Smiles stayed in place. Photos showed unity. Waves were graceful. But behind palace walls, a shift had happened. Camilla still appeared at major events. She held her role. But around Charlotte, there was distance now. No more side remarks, no more pointed looks, at least not within Catherine's reach. A boundary had been set. And even in a family built on centuries of hierarchy and tradition, some lines can't be crossed without consequences. Still, things weren't fully settled. Camilla had heard the warning. She just hadn't forgotten it. That tension followed them into summer. Balmoral has always been Charles's escape. Wide skies, quiet mornings, no flashing cameras. It was the late Queen's favorite place, and the family still respects that rhythm. Every summer they gather there. Tradition runs deep, but this year, the air felt different. Catherine agreed to go, but on her terms. She and William brought George, Charlotte, and Louis as expected. Before they arrived, she told William clearly she would not leave Charlotte alone. Not even for a few minutes. Not with Camilla. Everyone arrived in waves. Charles greeted them first, arms open, genuinely happy. He adores his grandchildren. You can't fake that kind of warmth. Camilla arrived a day later with her usual entourage and perfectly selected wardrobe. She had been noticeably quieter since Highgrove. No direct conversations with Catherine, only brief, formal exchanges at public events. Controlled, distant. Still, everyone acted like nothing had happened. The first few days at Balmoral were peaceful. Long walks across the hills, horseback rides, dinners filled with laughter, the kind of family scenes that look effortless from the outside. And slowly, Charlotte began to glow again. Catherine noticed it right away. Charlotte chatting at breakfast, racing through the fields with George and Louis, even helping one of the kitchen staff bake scones one afternoon, flour on her hands and a big grin on her face. That's the Charlotte Catherine knows. Then came the moment. Catherine was in the drawing room with Lady Sarah Chatto and a few aides. William had gone fishing with Charles. The children were outside in the garden, supervised by 2 staff members. It was the first time since arriving that Catherine had taken her eyes off them for more than a few minutes. Then a household aide leaned in quietly. "I believe Princess Charlotte is in the sunroom with Her Majesty." Catherine's posture shifted instantly. She didn't jump up. She didn't panic. But something inside her locked in. She excused herself without explanation and walked toward the sunroom. Calm steps, steady pace. As she approached, she heard voices. Camilla's voice and Charlotte's. Catherine paused just outside the door. "We don't always need to speak over others, Charlotte," Camilla was saying. "It's important to listen. Sometimes your mummy forgets that too." Charlotte didn't respond. That was enough. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked up, clearly surprised. "There you are!" "I was looking for you, darling," Catherine said evenly. Charlotte stood immediately and walked straight to her mother's side. No hesitation. "I was just having a word," Camilla said lightly, but there was a faint edge beneath it. "I heard," Catherine replied. Camilla raised a brow. She was only being a child," Catherine cut in, still calm, still measured. "And she doesn't need to be corrected every time she speaks." The room felt smaller. Camilla folded her arms. "I've raised children. I know when a girl is growing too fast for her own good." "She's growing up just fine," Catherine answered firmly, "and she'll do so without being made to feel like she's a problem." No shouting, no dramatic gestures, just clarity. The kind of clarity that leaves no space for debate. Charlotte stood quietly beside her mother, small hand gripping hers a little tighter. Catherine didn't look away from Camilla. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about status. It was about a child's confidence. And Catherine made one thing unmistakably clear in that sunroom at Balmoral. Her daughter's voice would not be trimmed down to make anyone else comfortable. Not here, not ever. "I'd like a bit more kindness around her," Catherine added calmly. "That shouldn't be too much to ask." Camilla said nothing. Her silence felt intentional, measured, almost strategic. But at this point, Catherine didn't care about the quiet power plays anymore. For years, she had protected the institution. Smiled when expected, smoothed tensions, absorbed moments that didn't sit right. Now her focus had shifted. Protecting her daughter came first. And after leaving the sunroom, Catherine knelt beside Charlotte in the hallway. The castle felt long and echoing, but in that moment, it was just the two of them. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered gently. Charlotte nodded, but her eyes were glossy, holding it together, but just barely. "You never need to be afraid of speaking up," Catherine told her. "Not here, not anywhere." That message landed deeper than any royal rule ever could. By the end of the week, palace staff had quietly noticed a shift. Camilla kept her distance during meals. She chose seats farther from the children. There were no comments about posture, no remarks about tone, no subtle corrections wrapped in polite smiles. It was subtle, but in the royal world, subtle speaks loud. Catherine hadn't shouted. She hadn't created headlines. She hadn't stormed out or made a public display. But her presence had drawn a clear line that no one could ignore. Even Charles, who had hoped the tension would dissolve with time, understood better than to step in again. He cared about both women. That much was obvious. But he also knew that when Catherine stands firm, she does it with reason and with finality. There's no halfway once she's made up her mind. The summer wrapped the way it always does. Official photographs on the castle steps, coordinated outfits, smiles bright, waves polished, the image of unity perfectly intact for the world to see. But behind those stone walls, something had shifted for good. Camilla hadn't lost her title. She hadn't lost her place. But she had lost something quieter, Catherine's willingness to overlook things for the sake of keeping peace. That tolerance was gone. And while the public continued to see a united royal front, one thing was certain behind closed doors. One mother made sure her daughter would never feel small again. So what would you have done if you were in Catherine's position? Do you think Camilla crossed a line? Or was this just a clash between two generations with different expectations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more deep dives like this, real tension, real dynamics, and the moments they don't show on the balcony, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next.